If you can remember, we left off at the end of chapter 15 was when Rob had been holding hands and running down the hill with Sistine when they thought Beauchamp was coming. And it said he felt, what feeling was it that Rob felt for the first time in a very long time in chapter 15? Who can remember what feeling he felt for the first time in a long time? CJ, what was it?
Happiness.
Yeah, for the first time in a really long time, he was happy. And then he started thinking about the things he used to do with his mom that made him happy, and he got very upset, and it said scolded himself. And scolding is like when you get angry at yourself and you kind of like tell yourself you shouldn't do that. Why was he angry at himself for thinking about times with his mom that were happy? Somebody besides CJ, who can remember? Why was he angry at himself for thinking about those happy times? Asil?
Because it reminded him of his mother's funeral.
Yeah, so it kind of reminded him of his mother in the past, and he started to think about it and get happy at first, but then it made him think about how he can't do that anymore and how it made him actually end up making him more sad thinking of those happy memories because he no longer could do those things that made him happy. So we're going to go ahead and start reading chapter 16. Rob sat out. Give me a thumbs up. Can everybody hear me okay? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me all right. Okay. Rob sat out on the curb in front of the motel room and waited for Sistine to come back from the phone. He had her green dress wrapped up in a grocery bag. He had tried to fold the dress up neatly, but folding a dress turned out to be an impossible task, and he finally just gave up. Now he held the bag out and away from him, so that the grease from the medicine on his legs would not stain it. He was relieved when Sistine finally walked toward him out of the darkness. "Hey," he said. "Hi." She sat down on the steps next to him. "How come you don't have a phone?" Rob shrugged. "Ain't nobody to call, I guess. My mother's coming to get me," Sistine said. Rob nodded at her. "Here's your dress," and he handed her the bag. Sistine took it, and then she tilted her head to look up at the sky. Rob looked up too. The clouds had shifted, and there were clear patches where the stars were shining through. "I can see the Big Dipper," Sistine said. "I like looking up at things. So do my mom and dad." That's how they met. They were both looking up at the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, and they weren't watching where they were going, and they bumped into each other. That's why I'm named Sistine. "I like your name," Rob said shyly. "I've seen the Sistine ceiling too," she said. "They took me last year, before Bridget, when they were still in love with each other." "Does it look like the pictures?" Rob asked. "Even better," said Sistine. "It's like, I don't know, it's like looking at fireworks, kind of. You just are in awe." "Oh," said Rob. "Maybe we could go to Italy sometime, and I could show you." "That'd be all right," said Rob. He smiled off into the darkness. "The tiger can't look up at the stars," said Sistine, her voice getting hard. "He's got that piece of wood over his head. He can't look up at all. We've got to let him go." So I'm going to stop. Is there anything we think from that, just those first couple pages in chapter 16, that we should write down that seems kind of important? Anything at all? Something. Somebody come up with something. Let's talk about, why was Sistine named Sistine?
Because her parents met at the Sistine Chapel.
There you go. Thank you. And then I would say one more thing is, what did Rob do when Sistine suggested they go to Italy? Who, raise your hand if you can tell me. When she said they should go to Italy together, she wanted to take him. What did Rob do? Call on somebody. Jay, do you remember what Rob did when Sistine said they should go to Italy? No? Okay. He smiles, y'all. All right, I'm going to give you about 2 minutes to write those down in your notebook. So now he's gone from saying that he felt happy when he was running through the woods with her, and now they are, he's smiling when she's suggesting they go to Italy. The thing I think is interesting, it seems interesting to me, is it says, I can see the Big Dipper, and they're sitting and looking at the stars, which means they have been kind of together. It's late, right? It's dark. And so that seemed interesting to me that Sistine had to call her mom to come get a ride when it was already dark outside. Like, and her mom had no idea where she was or who she was with until she called. So to me, that just seems a little bit interesting that the two of them were hanging out in the woods at nighttime behind the motel. That seems kind of different from what we would see most people their age doing or being allowed to do by their parents. So I'm going to give about one more minute, and I'm going to continue reading. Noticing Denise, Alex, Jay, Alejandro, and Michael are all writing. Henry and Cynthia are both writing. Thank you. I can see Guadalupe and Guadalupe writing. And Kayla and Ania and CJ. Not all. All right, if you're still writing, that's fine. I'm going to continue reading. The tiger can't look up at the stars, said Sistine, her voice getting hard. He's got that piece of wood over his head. He can't look up at all. We've got to let him go. Rob was silent. He was hoping that if he didn't answer her, she might go back to talking about the Sistine ceiling and forget about the tiger. How did your mother die? She asked very suddenly. Rob sighed. He knew there was no point in trying to not answer this question. She had cancer, he said. What was her name? I ain't supposed to talk about her, Rob said, closing his eyes to the stars and concentrating, instead on his suitcase, working to try to keep it closed. Why not? Said Sistine. Because. My dad says it don't do no good to talk about it. He says she's gone and she ain't coming back. That's why we moved here from Jacksonville, because everybody always wanted to talk about her. We moved down here to get on with things and move on. There was a crunch of gravel, and Rob opened his eyes in time to see the headlights of a car sweep over them. That's my mother, said Sistine. She stood up. Quick, she said. Tell me your mother's name. Rob shook his head. Say it, she demanded. Caroline, Rob said softly, cracking his suitcase open and letting the words slip out. Sistine gave him another businesslike nod of her head and said, Okay, I'll come back tomorrow, and we'll make our plans for letting the tiger go. Sissy, called a voice. Baby, what in the world are you doing out here? Sistine's mother got out of the car and came walking toward them. She had on high heels and she wobbled as she walked in the gravel parking lot of the Kentucky Star. Her hair was a lighter shade of yellow than Sistine's and piled up really high. When she turned her head, Rob recognized Sistine's profile. Her mom had a sharp chin and pointed nose, but the mouth was different, even tighter. Good Lord, said Miss Bailey to Sistine. What have you got on? Clothes, said Sistine. Sistine, you look like a hobo. Get in the car. She trapped her high-heeled foot on the gravel. Sistine didn't move. She stood beside Rob. Well, said her mother when Sistine didn't move, you must be Rob. What's your last name, Rob? Horton, said Rob. Horton, said Miss Bailey. Horton. Are you related to Selden Horton, the congressman? No, ma'am, said Rob. Not that I know of. Miss Bailey's eyes flicked away from him and back to Sistine. Baby, said Mrs. Bailey, please get in the car. When Sistine still didn't move, Mrs. Bailey sighed and looked back at Rob again. She won't listen to a word I say, Mrs. Bailey told him. Her father is the only one she'll listen to. And then, under her breath, she muttered, her father, the liar. Sistine growled somewhere deep in her throat and stalked into the car and slammed the door. You're the liar, she shouted from the backseat of the car. You're the one who lies. Dear Lord, said Miss Bailey. She shook her head and turned and walked back to the car without saying anything else to Rob. Rob watched them pull away, and he could see Sistine sitting in the back seat. Her shoulders were slumped, and she looked angry. The motel room door slammed, and then somebody laughed. A dog barked once, short and high in the distance, and then stopped. And then there was silence. Caroline, Rob whispered into the darkness to himself. Caroline, Caroline, Caroline. The word was as sweet as forbidden candy on his tongue. That's the end of chapter 16. So I read on a little bit. There's a lot I think we should write down, at least one or two things. So what are some things that came up that seemed important, that need to be written down about that chapter? I already see Ania's hand up, so go ahead, Ania.
When Sistine asked Rob what was his mother's name, he didn't want to answer, and she's just like, she wants him to answer her. She just doesn't want him to ignore her. She wants him to answer. So she's basically
Yeah, why did it say Rob didn't want to answer?
It's because he was trying to keep his suitcase closed.
Yeah. His dad told him not to talk about his mom, right? In fact, it said they moved there just so they could stop having to talk about his mom. So do you think, I want to ask you guys kind of a deeper question. We'll see where we get with this. It's kind of hard in the morning to think this hard, but somebody besides who I've already heard from, why do you guys think Rob really wants to keep his suitcase closed and not talk about his mom? Shake your head yes or no. Do you think Rob really wants to always keep his suitcase closed and not talk about his mom? I see some yeses and some nos. Corbin, why do you say no?
Because he wants to, if somebody like Sistine, she's saying she wants to know about his mom and what happened to her, and he gets emotional, and he kind of wants to share to Sistine, his friend, and tell her what happened so she'll stop asking what happened to your mom.
Yeah, and it also kind of seems like I think he kind of enjoys talking about, and like it even says at the end of the chapter, it says, Caroline, Rob whispered into the darkness. Caroline, Caroline, Caroline. The word was as sweet as forbidden candy on his tongue, right? So it's showing us he enjoys talking about his mom. He's just been told by who that he shouldn't talk about her. Who tells him he shouldn't talk about his mom? Cynthia?
His dad.
Yeah, his dad tells him not to talk about his mom. So it kind of seems like it's not really Rob's decision or what Rob feels, but he doesn't want to make his dad upset more. We're also going to add down here that his mom's name is Caroline. And I'm going to give you 2 minutes and we're going to move on. And I'm just going to read the last chapter. Not Rob's name. Rob's mom's name. All right, I'm going to read chapter 17 while you guys continue writing those things down. The next morning, Rob was helping Willie Mae in the laundry room. They were folding sheets and chewing 8-ball gum. All night he had tossed and turned, scratching his legs and thinking about the tiger and what Sistine said, and that they had to set it free. He had finally decided to get Willie Mae's opinion. You ever been to a zoo? Rob asked her. One time, said Willie Mae. She cracked her gum. Went to the zoo over in Sorley. Place stunk. Do you think them animals minded it, being locked up? Wasn't nobody asking them, did they mind, Willie Mae said, and she pulled another sheet out of the dryer and snapped it open. Rob tried again. Do you think it's bad to keep animals locked up, is what I'm saying. Willie Mae looked at him over the top of her glasses, and then she stared at him for a hard minute. Rob looked down at his feet. When I was but little, said Willie Mae, my daddy bought me a bird in a cage. It was a green parakeet bird. That bird was so small I could hold it right in the palm of my hand. She draped the sheet over one shoulder and held out a cupped hand to show Rob. It looked to him like a big hand that was big enough to hold the entire world. I held him in my hand, and I could feel his little heart beating. He would look at me, cock his head this way and that, and we called him Cricket on account of him all the time singing. What happened to him, Rob asked. Willie Mae bent down, took a pillowcase out of the dryer. We let him go, she said. You let him go, Rob repeated. His heart began to sink inside like a stone. Couldn't stand seeing the little bird locked up, so I let him go. And then she folded the pillowcase carefully. And then what happened? I got beat by my daddy, she said. He said I didn't do that bird no favor, said all I was going to do is have some snake was going to eat it for supper. So you never saw him again? Rob asked. Nuh-uh, said Willie Mae. But sometimes he comes flying through my dreams, flittering about and singing. She shook her head and reached out for a sheet on her shoulder. Here, she said. Go on and grab a hold of the other end and help me fold this up. Rob took hold of the sheet, and as it billowed out between them, a memory rose up before him. His father standing out in the yard, holding his gun up into the sky, taking aim at a bird. You think I can hit this bird, his father said. You think I can hit that itty-bitty bird? Robert, his mother said, do you want to shoot that bird? What do you want to shoot that bird for? To prove I can, said his father. There was a single crack, and the bird was suspended in midair, pinned for a moment in the sky with his father's bullet, and then the bird fell to the ground. Oh, Robert, Rob's mother said. It hurt the back of Rob's throat to think about that right now, to think about the gun and his mother and the small thud that the bird made when it hit the ground. I know something that's in a cage, said Rob, pushing the words past the tightness in his throat. Willie Mae nodded her head, but she wasn't listening. She was looking past Rob and past the white sheet, past the laundry room and past the Kentucky Star. Who don't, she said finally. Who don't know something in a cage? After that, they folded the sheets in silence. Rob thought about the bird and how he had finally found its small, still warm body, and he started to cry. His father told him not to. It ain't nothing to cry over, he'd said. It's just a bird. All right, so I'm going to move forward. That's the end of the chapter. And look at your two questions that are your job for today. All right, so there's two questions you're going to answer on Canvas. The first one is, what is Willie Mae's opinion on caged animals? So what do you think Willie Mae thinks about a caged animal? And then the number two is, tell me about the parakeet Willie Mae got for her birthday. All right, so the first one is, what is Willie Mae's opinion on caged animals? And the second one is, tell me about the parakeet Willie Mae got for her birthday. All right, those are your two questions. My 9-10 group for reading, we will stay on, and we'll read here in just a second. 9:40 group, we'll see you at 9:40. Miss Weibel and I still have people who are not showing up to reading groups, so please make sure you are showing up to your reading groups on time, guys. Okay, if you're 9:10 or you're 9:40, make sure you're showing up to your reading group.